something like it that will, once and for all, change the way that Washington works by undertaking reforms in our budget process here that will lead us to greater fiscal responsibility and greater prosperity for future generations. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from West Virginia.
Mr. President, tomorrow is March 11th. For most of us, this date carries no particular significance. It does, however, reflect exactly 6 months before September 11th. That date we do remember and will not forget. It is 6 months from the anniversary of the worst terrorist attack ever, and a day that we as a nation can never forget. It is 6 months from a date we will honor the memory of those whose lives came to an end and the way we came together, at least for a short period of time, as a nation. With that historic date approaching, I think that it's important that we honor the tremendous bravery of all public safety officials. I think this is one of the most important issues facing the Congress, and it's one that we can do something about very quickly and reduce the budget deficit by doing so. Our police, our firefighters, our emergency medical technicians, and the countless others who fought that day to keep us safe and who work every day to protect us from harm. We have essentially forgotten about them. The National Commission specifically said that you had to, the 9/11 Commission, they said you had to have a system which connected all law enforcement across this nation in an interoperable wireless system. Now, obviously, therefore, that's a way of saying the best and the simplest way to honor them is to make sure that we're giving them the tools they need to be successful, to be safe, and to do their job in a way that does not expose them to needless dangers. Right now, we're not doing that. Much as in the first Gulf War, when the Army and the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force couldn't communicate with each other because they were all on different systems of communications, and we all kind of laughed at that as being kind of pathetic. Well, they've sort of solved that, sort of, but we haven't solved this one at all, involving every single American and every single firefighter, policeman and law enforcement officer, deputies, sheriffs, all across the United States of America. So when it comes to public safety communications, these everyday heroes do not have the networks that they so could easily have and that they so desperately need, because we have not acted. We have not acted. 10-year anniversary coming up, 6 months from now, we have not acted. Too often, first responders lack that interoperable network that are essential to providing an effective response in emergencies, all kinds of emergencies, a lot of them very desperate, not all of them catastrophic, but always that potential. They don't have the ability to communicate with one another. They don't have the ability to communicate with other agencies. They don't have the ability to communicate with other cities and other cities and states across those state lines. They can't do that. I mean, it's kind of pathetic, the age of the Internet. We have chosen to do nothing, instructed by the 9/11 Commission to do something a long, long time ago. We have done nothing. So this hampers our ability to respond to crisis, this lack of equipment. Whether that crisis is a terrorist attack or a natural disaster, it puts lives in unnecessary peril. I believe it is time to do something about it. In the Commerce Committee, we happen to take that approach. That's why I introduced S-28, the Public Safety Spectrum and Wireless Innovation Act. This legislation, Mr. President, does only two things. First, it sets aside the 10 megahertz of spectrum known as the D block. I don't know why it's called the D block, but it's called the D block. It's 10 megahertz adds on to the 10 megahertz they already had. That means 20. It means they could do the whole thing, completely connect with each other. Every sheriff, every state police person, every law enforcement, federal, state, county, municipal, all be on one system, talk to each other from a common communications base and a common database. It's an interoperable wireless broadband network that we have to have, and it's that we don't have. We don't have because we haven't made the effort. Now, the second thing it does, it gives the Federal Communications Commission the authority to do something very interesting, to hold incentive auctions based on the voluntary return of spectrum which is not necessarily being used by a whole variety of people who just want to hold on to it. Better to hold on to something than give it. But we give them incentive on a voluntary basis, crucial word in this legislation, on a voluntary basis, to return that spectrum. These auctions, in turn, will provide the funding to support the construction and maintenance of public safety's network, which they need and which I have been speaking about. And they will free up additional spectrum for innovative commercial uses. In short, this bill marries resources for the first responders with good commercial spectrum policy. It can keep us safe and help our economy grow. So that's why the legislation has the support of absolutely every major public safety organization across this country, obviously included those in my state. That is why this bill also has strong support from all governors, all mayors across this country. They have to deal with this. We don't. They do. And that is why we have now the support of the administration. So I urge my colleagues to support the Public Safety, Spectrum, and Wireless Innovation Act. To those who say we can't afford to do this now, obviously I would say we can't afford not to. The world of intelligence reveals all kinds of things going on not only outside the country but inside the country, implying that there is a target or many of them within this country. But if this is not compelling enough, I think it's important for people to know this. This legislation pays for itself, plus doesn't cost a dime. According to the White House and even the industry itself, telecommunications industry, incentive auctions will bring in revenue so much above what funding public safety requires, it will leave billions over that amount, for example, deficit reduction. And I'm talking a whole lot of deficit reduction, billions and billions. So it's a win-win-win. I close. Let me just say that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to provide our public safety officials with the spectrum that they need to communicate when tragedy strikes. We have chosen not to do that. And now there is this sort of malicious and delicious pressure of the 9/11 Commission's directive to us to do our duty as a country to the people who keep us safe. And more than that, we really do need to keep this country safe, and it's not always going to be safe. And we just don't know when the next attack will come. So that we have the incentive auctions, which are voluntary, but they will work. They can be sold for lots of money, and we will have, therefore, lots of money over and above what it costs to build this interoperable wireless broadband system across the entire country, connecting every law enforcement official to every other one. To my colleagues, I say, let's seize this moment. This is not Republican, this is not Democrat, it's simply the right thing to do. And I ask people to think back to those images of 9/11, of that day. Not just the 9/11 Commission report that emanated from that, why we couldn't stop that, but just to think of the images of that day, of what those people absorbed in their lungs, the natural instinct for firefighters to come from all over the country, policemen to come from all over the country, ambulance people to come from all over the country, to New York City, the city which they, don't start out loving generally out there in the hinterlands, but they knew this was a crisis. They reacted. They saved lives, and they imperiled their own, and many of them lost their lives. So let's do something historic, Mr. President, and let's do it together, and let's do it here in this Congress. And certainly let us get this all done before the 10th anniversary of September 9th. I yield the floor.
The gentleman from Illinois, the senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, we are borrowing $5 billion per day. That's $35 billion borrowed per week to run our government, totaling over $1.5 trillion borrowed just to run the government for a year. Harvard's great economic historian, Niall Ferguson, noted the decline of a country can be clearly marked when we see it paying its moneylenders more than its army. His classic case comes from the French monarchy of the 1780s, who failed to make interest payments on their debt, causing a financial collapse that triggered their revolution. Recently, Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff wrote a brilliant book entitled "This Time is Different: 8 Centuries of Financial Folly." Their vast study revealed that most government officials always believe that they are unique and different, and then make the same mistakes that have brought low past nations and empires. Well, using Niall Ferguson's tipping point, where are we today? This year, the total cost of maintaining our Army equals about $137 billion. This year, we will pay $225 billion in interest to our moneylenders for the use of $14 trillion borrowed from China, Japan, and elsewhere. The startling conclusion is the United States has already passed Ferguson's tipping point by paying America's moneylenders more than its own army. And it gets worse. In just 6 years, the administration says we will have to pay over $661 billion to our moneylenders for interest on rapidly expanding debts. With the expected cost of our Army at $195 billion, our Air Force at $201 billion, and our Navy Marines at $217 billion, the total cost of $613 billion to provide for our common defense will be smaller than the $661 billion due to our moneylenders. In simple economic terms, we will be forced to pay our moneylenders first before taking care of our own safety, or risk seeing the value of the very dollars in our wallets disappear. Now remember, the numbers that I have quoted here are optimistic. They assume no severe spike in interest costs and no additional war. Recently, the Senate agonized over a short-term, 2-week spending bill that made a $4 billion cut to spending. We should see that bill's cuts as modest, knowing that we will already pay $616 million daily in interest and over $4 billion in interest per week. In sum, the cuts made by the 2-week bill adopted by the Congress saved just 1 week's interest payment for the United States. As dire as the situation is, there could be a bright side. Our country has seen this movie before. Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, they all accumulated economy-crushing debts as the fate of the United States hung in the balance. Our best example of what to do next comes from our own grandparents, rightly entitled The Greatest Generation. Tom Brokaw coined the title for Americans of the 1930s and 40s who defeated the Depression, the Japanese, and the Nazis simultaneously. But I would add a fourth, largely unnoticed victory that Brokaw missed. After 3 great victories for freedom, our grandparents then spent the next 20 years paying the debts that they incurred to win the contest with the Depression and in the Pacific and in Europe. Their accumulated debts of 1946 totaled over 120% of our national income. Economists report that between economic growth and some inflation, the greatest generation reduced the crippling World War II debts that secured our victory during the late 1940s and decade of the 1950s. The return to a more fiscally responsible government sparked an economic boom that built a superpower called the United States of America. The history lesson here is clear. Each generation has faced conflict, war, and debt, and each generation is tested. The looming debt crisis facing this government is our generation's test. While some government officials and bankers may counsel ineffective actions saying, "We owe this money to ourselves," or "Because the dollar is the reserve currency, we can owe this amount," we know that the crisis we face is not different from the ones that brought other nations low. With spending cuts and discipline, we can master this danger as our grandparents did. We need to do the hard things, like entitlement reform, and make similar moves in dramatic fashion the way our grandparents did to secure our future. But there is one difference that's truly there between us and other nations. From the dawn of our revolution, the United States has become the greatest force for human liberty and dignity ever known. The United States ended slavery, gave women the right to vote, and spread freedom across Europe, Latin America, and Asia. We are now challenged by a 21st century set of worldviews in the Middle East and China that do not hold the Western value of the individual as high as we do. Therefore, it is doubly important to do the work needed to reduce spending and balance the books so that we restore the vitality of a free people and their cause of expanding liberty and human dignity. So the next time you see a member of the greatest generation, don't just say thank you. Ask them for their advice on how to trim budgets and restore economic growth in the face of extraordinary debts the way they did. And, Mr. President, I yield back and would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to end the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I, too, take the floor of the Senate to urge all of us, Democrats and Republicans alike, to focus on the single biggest domestic threat to our country, our single greatest challenge in the eyes of every Louisianian, every American I know, and that is to stop this runaway spending and debt. Mr. President, Americans all around the country, certainly Louisianians all around my state, understand that this is a grave threat to our economic future. And it's not just some vague threat to generations 2 and 3 away from us. This is an immediate threat because the path of spending and debt we're on is completely unsustainable. We must come together in a bipartisan way. We must act. We must solve this real and pressing problem before it's an immediate crisis. And, Mr. President, I think we should clearly do that well before the any need for an increase in the debt limit arises, well before this Congress reaches a crisis atmosphere over the need for an increase in the debt limit. For all of these reasons, Mr. President, I've joined together with many of my colleagues, and I sent the Majority Leader, Senator Reid, a letter today. And first, let me thank all of my colleagues who joined me on this letter, Senators Sessions, Rubio, DeMint, Paul, Lee, Toomey, and Ensign. The letter is very simple and very straightforward. It says that this is the greatest challenge we face. And it says that because of that, we need to face it. We need to debate it. We need to talk about it. We need to act. And we need to start doing that now, well before any significant deadline like when the debt limit may have to be increased. So the letter says, Mr. Leader, we're going to oppose moving to any other bill that doesn't directly address this crisis when we need to act on this grave threat. Let me read relevant portions of the letter because I think it goes right to the point. Dear Leader Reid, yesterday the Senate voted on 2 proposals to fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year. But this debate gave us only a limited opportunity to discuss what Americans know is the crucial issue of our time, cutting government spending and dramatically reducing our national debt. Additionally, no member of the Senate was permitted to offer amendments under the structured process, which in our opinion prevents a full, open, and robust debate. With our national debt poised to reach its $14.3 trillion limit in the very near future, taxpayers expect Congress to work together to reduce wasteful and unnecessary spending and be more vigilant about how we spend public funds. The American people want Congress to deal with the tough issues of cutting spending, and almost every member of the Senate has agreed that we must address our fiscal situation immediately. While there are certainly many issues that warrant the Senate's consideration, we feel that the Senate must not debate and consider bills at this time that do not affirmatively cut spending, directly address structural budget reforms, reduce government's role in the economy so businesses can create jobs, or directly address this current financial crisis. The American people resoundingly rejected the way the Senate waited until Christmas Eve as a mechanism to force hurried debate on President Obama's massive health care legislation. Voting to proceed to another legislative measure effectively runs away from the central issues of spending and debt and repeats that flawed process. We therefore are notifying you of our intention to object to the consideration of any legislation that fails to directly address this crisis in a meaningful way. Our objections would be withheld if the Senate agrees to dedicate significant floor time to debate this issue well in advance of the federal government reaching our statutorily mandated debt limit. Sincerely, and again, it is signed by both myself and Senators Sessions, Rubio, DeMint, Paul, Lee, Toomey, and Ensign to the Majority Leader. And again, Mr. President, the statement is clear. This is a crisis. We need to act certainly before we reach the statutory debt limit. So what are we waiting for? Let's act now. Let's not move to other cats and dogs bills that may be positive legislation but can certainly wait. Let's move to the people's business. Let's move to the absolute top challenge we face domestically as a country. Let's come together and debate, vote on, and hopefully begin to solve this problem of unsustainable spending and debt. Now, Mr. President, to do that, we also need leadership, ideas, suggestions, and I believe we have provided that on this side of the aisle, and we would welcome ideas, suggestions, concrete proposals from all members. Let me just list the more than 24 pieces of legislation that go directly to this issue. Let me just list some of them. Senate Bill 14 by Senator Ensign to establish the Commission on Congressional Budgetary Accountability and Review of Federal Agencies. Senate Bill 81, an Isaacson bill to direct unused appropriations for Senate official personnel and office expense accounts to be deposited into the Treasury and actually reduce the federal debt. Senate Bill 102, a McCain bill which requires OMB to transmit to Congress a message with specified information requesting any rescission the President proposes under the procedures instituted under that act. Senate Bill 162 by Senator Paul to cut $500 billion in federal spending from FY 2011. Senate Bill 163 by Senator Toomey, the Full Faith and Credit Act to prioritize principal and interest payments when and if the debt limit is reached. Senate Bill 178 by Senator DeMint to reduce federal spending by $2.5 trillion through fiscal year 2021. Senate Bill 245 by Senator Corker, his so-called CAP Act to create a discretionary spending cap for Congress. Senate Bill 259, this is my bill to prioritize Social Security payments if and when the debt limit is reached. Senate Bill 360 by Senator Inhofe to create a point of order to exceed non-security discretionary limits and also to create spending limits for fiscal years 2017 to 2021. Senate Bill 389 by Senator Kirk, and I believe Senator Hatch has a very similar bill to establish a commission to review cost control. Senate Bill 391 by Senator Moran to rescind all unobligated balances of President Obama's stimulus bill. Senate Joint Resolution 3 by Senator Hatch, a balanced budget amendment. And Senate Joint Resolution 4 by Senator Shelby on the same topic. And Senate Joint Resolution 5 by Senator Lee on the same topic. This is a long list, but it's certainly not exhaustive, Mr. President. I just read a partial list to make the point. We're coming up with ideas, proposals, solutions. We encourage every senator of every party to come up with ideas, proposals, solutions, and let's actually talk about the greatest threat we face as a country. Let's talk about it now. Let's debate it now. Let's exchange ideas in a positive atmosphere now, well before we reach any crisis atmosphere over the debt limit. Again, Mr. President, I respectfully urge the distinguished Majority Leader, Senator Reid, to heed our call, to take up our call to arms, to read our letter and react by creating identified time on the floor well before we reach the statutory debt limit to debate and pass solutions on this crucial topic. Again, Mr. President, I don't think there is debate that this isn't the greatest challenge we face as a country, that this isn't the greatest economic threat we face. So quite simply, what are we waiting for? We need time to bring forth these ideas and exchange them and debate them and act. We need time to do this well before the statutory debt limit is reached. We need to do the people's business in a reasonable way, in a sober atmosphere, not in an atmosphere of hysteria or threats when the debt limit would be reached in a matter of days. With that, Mr. President, I urge all of my colleagues to join us in this effort to come to the floor with your ideas, your proposals, and let's do the people's business. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that our letter be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I also ask unanimous consent that this partial list of Republican solutions and proposals be made part of the record.
Without objection.
And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk in Morning Business about the energy issue that is facing our country. Anyone who has filled up a car or truck in the last month knows that we have an energy crisis that is building in our country that needs to be addressed. Last week, I filled up my pickup truck, and it cost about $50. Across the nation, parents are driving carpools, farmers, small business owners, and commuters are experiencing sticker shock at the rising cost to put gas in their vehicles. Today, oil is over $104 a barrel. That means, on average, Americans are paying $3.52 a gallon, and it is going in the upward direction from there. We are clearly in an economic downturn. We have high unemployment. Now is not the time to sit back and do nothing as the price of gasoline goes up at the pumps. In response to this, the White House is beginning to talk about tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We know that will not work. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is available for natural disasters and global disasters. But experience has shown us that any gain from releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is small and temporary, and prices quickly go right back up to their high and rising levels. And if we diminish our resources, our reserves in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, we are even more vulnerable to those who would do mischief to our country because they would know we have a diminished supply, or to the natural disasters for which we are supposed to be prepared. Our problem is that we are the only nation on earth that has vast natural resources which we will not use. American energy is out there. It is under our land. It is under our waters. It is ready to be tapped, and it can be tapped environmentally safely. We could bring the prices down on our own accord. We know that there is upheaval in the Middle East right now that could affect further the gasoline prices because of potential shortages. We are too dependent on foreign sources for our energy needs in this country. It's about 60%. That is not strategically sound, and it is most certainly not in our national security interest to leave us at that level. The Gulf of Mexico is probably the second biggest resource that we have. Alaska is the first. The Gulf of Mexico accounts for nearly 30% of total U.S. oil production and 13% of natural gas production in our country. By failing to take full advantage of that resource, we are putting our energy security on the line. 400,000 jobs across the Gulf Coast are tied to the offshore energy industry. Nearly a year after issuing its moratorium and months since the moratorium was lifted, the Department of Interior last week approved its first, its one and only deepwater permit. One in a year. And it is one and one only. There are thousands of idled leases, people sitting in the Gulf of Mexico idle, that should be able to be at least exploring to determine if it is worth drilling, and yet the Gulf is facing a permitorium. My constituents know the pain of this permitorium. One unfortunate case is the Houston-based Seahawk Drilling Company. Seahawk Drilling used to be the second largest shallow water drilling contractor in the United States. It provides high-paying jobs to men and women in Texas and across the Gulf of Mexico. I say used to because in February, bureaucratic delays in shallow water permitting forced Seahawk Drilling to declare bankruptcy. They could not continue to have the costs associated with their employment levels and their company just being there without the opportunity to drill and produce and keep their employee base. They declared bankruptcy. It destroyed 1,000 high-paying Texas jobs. I received a letter describing the pain and distress the company felt when it had to inform the dedicated Seahawk employees that they no longer had a job. According to the letter, on the day Seahawk was forced to sell its assets and lay off workers, the chief operating officer fought back the emotions of the day, took a deep breath, and left the conference room for a room full of Seahawk employees to announce to them that their company was bankrupt. These are real people with real families who lost real jobs, American jobs, and it could have been prevented. Since the moratorium was enacted, at least 13 rigs, deep water and shallow water, have departed the Gulf of Mexico, taking with them good American jobs, and furthermore, putting us in the position of having to import now from the foreign countries where these rigs have gone, not only taking away American jobs, but forcing us to be even more dependent on foreign imports for our energy needs. Offshore energy production is expected to decrease by 13% in 2011 due to the slow pace of permitting. This is unacceptable, and we must do something that is productive. Now, yesterday, Senator Landrieu and I introduced the LEASE Act, the Lease Extension and Secure Energy Act of 2011. All our bill does is extend the offshore leases that are impacted by the moratorium and the lack of permitting for 1 year. The lease returns to lessees the lease time taken from them during the moratorium. This will increase domestic energy production and protect some American jobs, those that have not already left. Despite being unable to explore for energy resources, the leaseholders are continuing to pay the expenses as time ticks away on their lease. The Lease Act will prevent leases from running out, and it gives the lessees the certainty they deserve that they will have the full amount of the lease for which they have paid bonus payments to secure. In 2009, the industry accounted for $70 billion in economic value and provided $20 billion in revenue to federal, state, and local governments through royalties, bonuses, and tax collections. So I hope that our bill will be non-controversial. It would seem to me that anyone would agree that if you paid for a 10-year lease and you have the expenses of exploring to see if that lease has potential, before you drill to see if the lease has potential, that you would have the full 10 years and not 9 years because you have not been able to use the year that we have had the moratorium and the lack of permitting. There has been another suggestion by the administration that perhaps we should be proposing energy taxes up to $90 billion over the next 10 years. The President suggested that in his State of the Union message. Much of the taxes that would go on the oil and gas industry for expenses that any industry, any business can write off, but would single out the oil and gas industry not to be able to expense their exploration and drilling costs, what would happen? If the prices go up, of course, who's going to pay those high prices? The families and businesses that are having to fill their cars with gasoline. In fact, the administration through the EPA is also trying to take away, well, actually, I misspoke. It's not the EPA. The EPA is trying to bring more expenses to the refining industry by purporting to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, but the administration is also adding to the refiners by saying that they shouldn't get the manufacturing tax credit. We've been trying to encourage manufacturing in America because we want manufacturing jobs in America. So many of those have gone overseas, but the administration proposes to tax the refiners who are manufacturing the gasoline from the oil and add more expense to the product, which is gasoline, and, oh, by the way, take away the capability for these refiners to have the same treatment as any other manufacturer in our country. Raising taxes on our domestic oil and energy industry is wrong, particularly at this time. We need to assure that we are not going to drive our energy jobs overseas. And yet, what the administration is doing is counterintuitive if we all agree that we want to keep the jobs in America. So here we are with gas at $3.52 a gallon, and the summer driving season is upon us. We are looking now at estimates from the experts that gasoline could be $4 a gallon. What is that going to do to the family that wants to take a vacation at a reasonable price? What is that going to do to the workers who have to get to work and who are already strapped? And for heaven's sakes, the poor people who are unemployed, who are trying to go and interview for jobs at $4 a gallon? Mr. President, we can't sit here and let this happen. It is time that we get together with the President of the United States and have proactive energy ideas, programs, and solutions that are going to keep jobs in America, that will allow us to use our natural resources to begin to set the stage if we have upheaval in the Middle East that causes the supply to go down at a great rate. We need to have our supply go up to meet the test that we should have of lowering energy prices to our people with our own natural resources. And it's not to put the SPRO out and put us in an even more vulnerable position. No, it is to use our resources with Americans to take the jobs and increase our supply so that the price of gasoline at the pump goes down for the American people and so that we can have the jobs that we should have in America stay in America. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
The senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. 12 years ago this very day, the Senate passed a resolution that honored Harriet Tubman Day on March 10th. That resolution was sponsored by Senator Carper and then Senator Biden. In the House of Representatives, I served and I co-sponsored a similar resolution. Harriet Tubman was a remarkable woman. She was born in Dorchester County, Maryland in 1822, and she was a slave for greater than 25 years of her life. At age 25, she married John Tubman. She escaped slavery in 1849, but she returned to the Eastern Shore of Maryland not once, but 19 times that we know of within a 10-year period in order to rescue slaves and to set them free. She rescued slaves in Dorchester County and Caroline County in Maryland and throughout the entire Northeast. She was known as the modern-day Moses for the Underground Railroad. In the Civil War, she joined Union forces as a spy, as a scout, and as a nurse, operating in Virginia, Florida, and South Carolina. After the Civil War was over, she settled in Auburn, New York, and was very actively involved in the women's suffrage and established one of the first African-American homes for the aged. She died in 1913. Harriet Tubman embodies the American spirit. She was a strong-willed person who fought for the rights and freedom of those who were oppressed in the barbaric institution of slavery. Her personal freedom was not enough for her, because she recognized there was injustice in this country, and she wanted to be involved. As the resolution that passed the Senate 12 years ago said, Harriet Tubman, whose courage and personal pursuit of the promise of the American ideals and common principles continues to serve and inspire all people who cherish freedom. A major part of learning and understanding the significance of history is being able to experience the places where that history occurred. From Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland, to the Lincoln Memorial here in the nation's capital, we have preserved our history for future generations. Millions of visitors and schoolchildren visit these iconic places in American history. Harriet Tubman National Historic Park and the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historic Park is legislation that I have filed so that we can preserve the history of Harriet Tubman by its historic places for future generations. I'm joined in this effort by Senator Mikulski, Senator Schumer, and Senator Gillibrand. The natural landscape on the Eastern Shore that existed during Harriet Tubman's day exists today. Her homestead, where her father was born, Ben Ross, exists today. The Stewart's Canal, where her father worked, exists today. The Broadrist Farm, where Harriet Tubman worked as a slave, exists today. And right adjacent to it, and including part of that property, is the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. So we have the landscape in which the Underground Railroad was operating to free slaves in the 19th century exists today on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. In Auburn, New York, the home in which Harriet Tubman lived still exists. The home for the aged that she started still remains. The Thompson Memorial AME Zion Episcopal Church is still there. Fort Hill Cemetery, where she is buried, all are intact, all are available for preservation. The legislation that we have filed will preserve these places in American history under our national park system for future generations. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, to honor a great American, and to preserve our heritage for future generations. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that, appearing separately in a record, I might submit a statement related to asthma and the impact of health disparities, and just make one brief comment before I make that unanimous consent request, and that is, I have pointed out on the floor before that race and ethnic health disparities exist in America. I talked before on the floor about sickle cell disease. Well, the same thing is true with the chronic inflammatory diseases of the body's airway that impede breathing, such as asthma. As I pointed out before, the Affordable Care Act includes a provision that I helped write that establishes the Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities at NIH. And the purpose for including this information about asthma in the record is to point out that we still have challenges that need to be met, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on that issue, and I would make that request.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the roll be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, everyone is aware of how deeply concerned the American people are about staying in their homes, about having adequate health care, and about providing education and a better path for the lives of their children. But everyone also knows that there's a group calling themselves the Tea Party, and they're busy trying to eliminate those opportunities. In Wisconsin, a Tea Party governor is trying to take away workers' collective bargaining rights to be represented. It's like going into a courtroom without a lawyer. In Florida, another Tea Party governor has killed a critical high-speed rail project by rejecting federal grants of $2.4 billion to move it along. Threw it away, threw it back, $2.4 million. And here in Congress, Tea Party activists have seized control of the Republican side of the aisle. And it's a far from a Tea Party for lots of jobless people and those qualified to study in college but just unable to pay the freight. And now that they're in power, we see them brewing a toxic tea, a dangerous concoction that will create pain for our children and ultimately bring shame to our country. Now, we know that cutting critical programs now brings sky-high prices later, in more illnesses, and a less educated society. So we look at the future, and we say we've got to invest in our children, our environment, and medical research. But every time they hear something that we need, they just say no. They insist on saying no to 200,000 little kids who now go to Head Start programs that help them in the earliest stages of life when learning is fun and curiosity abounds. Look here. You see a young child's face in there, holding back 218,000 Head Start kids from learning to learn. They ought to visit these schoolrooms and be up front with these children and their parents and just say, sorry, America can't help you. That's not all. Look at what they want to do to higher education. We say we must invest in Pell Grants which make the dream of college a reality for millions of disadvantaged Americans. And they say, sorry, your country can't help you. They say no to future employers. Too bad. We just don't have enough qualified workers. So maybe the employers then can appropriately say, oh, well, ship the jobs overseas. That's the alternative. Is that what we want America to do? They say no, even though the unemployment rate is twice as large for those who lack a bachelor's degree as for college graduates. And they're unable to look at a simple chart like this one. There you see the way the arrow is pointed, the year 2000 over here, the year 2009 over here, rising tuitions. That's what's happening. And therefore, it tells you how difficult it is for those who don't have the money, the family support financially to be able to take advantage of the Pell Grants because they want to slash them. They just want to get them off the record as much as they can. Here it shows you between $10,000 and $15,000 tuition rate, 2000, 2001, I repeat. In 2008 and 2009, we're somewhere close to $20,000 a year. Do we really want to force middle-class students to take on more debt in order to attend college, or slam shut the campus doors of them altogether? Now, I know the value of a government investment in college to education firsthand. I came from a poor working-class family. I was a teenager when I enlisted in the Army. My father was on his deathbed. He died, and he left a 37-year-old widow, my mother, and my 12-year-old sister. And thanks to the GI Bill, I attended college at Columbia and later co-founded a company with two other fellows, a company that we started with nothing, Mr. President. We had zero in funding, put together a few $100. And now that company employs 45,000 employees in 23 countries, based in New Jersey, jobs in this country. We built the greatest generation out of those educational opportunities that we had post-military. And we were moving America to the top of the economic ladder. Government investment in my education made all the difference in my life, and now the 45,000 people who work for ADP. And now Republicans want to take away opportunities like that from young people. People who go into a business, have an education, learn something about how to operate a business, but also learn how we ought to be facing job opportunities and economic development for all in our country. But that's not all the House Republicans have in store for our country. We've got to protect women's health, but they won't listen. They want to wipe out funding for Title X. Title X offers women access to critical health services, including cervical cancer tests, breast cancer screenings, encouragement to think about family planning and how they're going to get by. They want to, but these people on the other side, they don't want to hear it. They don't care. They don't care that Title X offers women access to the billions of poor women benefit from Title X, so killing it will take care away from those who need it most. Title X funding for women's health. House, GOP, Tea Partiers, lots of them, eliminate $1 billion for women's care. Cancel funding for 2 million breast cancer screenings. How cruel is that in this country of ours? If you got money, you can take care of yourself. If you don't, too bad. Well, that's not the way we want to do it. That's not the way we want to do it on this side of the aisle. They're cutting off resources for 2.2 million cervical cancer screenings. What a horror that is. Why did these women, what did they do to deserve higher health risks during their lifetimes? But it gets worse. The Republicans are also going after medical research. We say we must invest in finding cures and treatments for millions of children suffering from asthma, diabetes, autism, and pediatric cancer, to name just a few of those health-damaging afflictions. And to these children, they say, oh, you know what? If you don't feel good, maybe you should go to an emergency room with your parents. Stand in line. Too bad. We'd like to help, but we just can't do that. The National Institutes of Health are making strides in fighting childhood diseases, but the Republicans want to reduce NIH's ability to do their research by taking $1 billion out of their budget. You want to see bravery? Look into the eyes of a child struggling with leukemia, and look in the parents' eyes, and you see tears, often no hope. And look what the Republicans want to do to our environment. We say we must invest in the Clean Air Act, a law that spares millions of children suffering from asthma. And the Republicans say, no can do. They say you can't restrict polluters with regulations. It's too cumbersome. And if you don't like regulations, for instance, take a look at a bothersome thing that we have in America. They're called red lights. They're cumbersome. They stop the traffic. These people don't want regulations, so we ought to get rid of the red lights. Let the traffic move. Watch yourself when you get to crossings. Maybe they would like to get rid of the air traffic control system. Pilots have to wait for some government bureaucrat to tell them where and when they can fly. What a nerve that is to interfere with these regulations and rules. The Republicans also want to let mercury back into our air. Mercury. It's brain poisoning for children. And they also want to stop us from restricting soot pollution. Look at the picture. Soot's ugly. When it's pouring from a smokestack, it's even uglier inside a child's lungs. And this is the picture that you see in many places in our country. Some years ago, Mr. President, I wrote a law. It's called the Right to Know. It says to people who live in areas where there's chemicals present, either manufacturing, being stored, transported, so that people could know that if they hear a particular alarm that they have to respond to it, report it to the fire department. We had an incident in New Jersey some years ago when a group of firemen in Elizabeth, New Jersey, responded to a chemical fire. and in some instances their protective uniforms melted. And that's kind of a situation that we want to avoid. We want people to know what's being stored, what's being released in the air in case of a fire. Finally, when we say we've got to clean the water that our children drink, the Republican answer is, hey, we can't handle that. Costs too much. So they cut the fund that helps states protect our drinking water from E. coli, arsenic, and other dangerous substances. The water is not safe for dishwashing, no less consumption. So the House GOP keeps on brewing a toxic tea for America. Ask any parent if they want their kids to drink from that teapot. Mr. President, they don't. They don't. And we shouldn't make them do it. So we need to gather together, all of us, for things like birthday parties and school graduations, lots of smiles instead of their toxic tea parties. Let's reject the House Republican Tea Party approach to funding our government. When they say, hey, join us for a cup of toxic tea, we're going to say, no, we have had this long enough and we're not going to stand for it anymore. Mr. President, you know very well that what we're looking at is very constricted budgets. And one doesn't have to be an economist or a business executive to know that when there's a financial statement, it comes in two parts. One part is the expenses that you need to operate with, and the other are the revenues that permit the companies and the organizations to function. And what we're lacking is revenues. And I know that you share that position with me. We've discussed it. And why shouldn't people who have the means, who have the good fortune to make lots and lots and lots of money, why should we saw something this afternoon on a chart that had janitors in New York City, some locations, paying a higher tax rate on their earnings than those who earn $1 million or more. It's not fair. It's not fair. And so if we want to do the right thing, we have to introduce revenues into the budget. We have to restore the cuts that they want to make on the other side. We want to restore the children's health. We want to make sure that NIH is producing as much as it can and turn America back to a lot more smiles than we've seen. With that, I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Mr. President.